All right, ready to explore something pretty cool. We're doing a deep dive on predictive species and habitat modeling.
Oh, this is fun stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Basically, we're going to see how scientists predict where species might live, even if.
Even if we haven't seen them there.
Exactly. And you sent some really interesting papers on this, textbook excerpts, some academic articles, even real-world examples.
Yeah, I tried to pick a good mix.
Yeah, it looks awesome. I'm excited to see what we can find.
It's a field that's really changing quickly, too,
Hmm.
especially with, well, everything that's happening.
Right, exactly, with climate change and habitat loss and everything.
Yeah, that's what makes this so important.
Makes it so important. Yeah, understanding, where species are going to be is crucial for conservation.
Absolutely, yeah. Being able to predict how they might react to these changes and how to protect them, it's huge.
Okay, so let's start with the basics then.
Sure.
The papers keep mentioning landscape ecology.
Right.
What is that exactly?
Well, imagine a giant puzzle,
Hmm.
right? Each piece is a different habitat. A forest, a grassland, whatever.
Got it.
Landscape ecology is understanding how all those pieces fit together.
So it's how all those habitats are connected.
Yeah. How they influence where different species live.
So it's not just like studying one forest, but the whole,
It's the whole picture.
the whole picture, yeah.
Exactly. So like if you're trying to figure out where a species might be,
Hmm.
you need to think about not just what it likes, but how all that's connected.
Because animals might need to move between those areas to find...
Food or mates, exactly. Or to get away from predators.
Right.
A fragmented landscape, that could be really tough for a species, even if there are some spots that look okay.
I see. So connectivity is really important for making good predictions.
Super important.
Okay, that makes sense. But let's talk about the fuel for these models, data.
Oh, absolutely.
The papers emphasize how crucial good data is.
It's the foundation.
Yeah.
And it comes from all kinds of places, like on-the-ground surveys.
Or researchers are out there counting.
Yeah, counting individuals or satellite imagery to see the big picture.
It's like having all these different ways to see the natural world.
Exactly. And sometimes even museums.
Museums.
Yeah. Preserved specimens often have location data.
Wow, that's amazing, like a historical record.
Exactly. It can be super valuable.
But even with all this data, the papers mention something called false absences.
All right, that's a big one.
What's that all about?
Well, just because you don't see a species somewhere doesn't mean it wasn't there.
Oh, so you could just miss it.
You could miss it, or maybe it was hiding.
Ah, I see.
So we're always working with incomplete information, really.
So how do scientists deal with that? How can they be confident in their predictions?
Well, they use statistics to account for that, the chance of missing something.
Oh, okay.
Try to estimate the probability of not seeing a species during a survey, so it helps refine the predictions.
It's like accounting for, I don't know, the shadows in a photograph or something.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, so we've got the data, we understand the landscape. Now what about the models themselves?
Right.
There's so many simpler statistical ones to more complex algorithms.
It's true. It's like, a chef chooses different tools for different recipes, right?
So it's about picking the right tool for the job.
Exactly. One common approach is using distance-based models. These models are especially helpful when researchers only have data on where a species is found, but not where it isn't.
Interesting.
Like, say you mapped out the locations of a rare flower and predicted where else it might grow based on the conditions in those known spots. Think of it like that.
Cool, I see.
And then you've got max hen tip models. Have you heard of those?
Yeah, I saw those mentioned.
It stands for maximum entropy, and it's a type of distance-based model that's getting really popular.
Oh, yeah.
Uses the known spots to figure out the probability of finding that species across a larger area.
So that's for when you only know where the species is, but not necessarily where it isn't?
Right, exactly.
Okay, and then there are the more, I guess you'd call them traditional approaches, like GLMs.
Yeah, the generalized linear models.
Right, those seem like the workhorses of ecological modeling.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. It's a statistical approach that helps relate a species, how often it's found or how many there are, to things in the environment like temperature or rainfall.
Okay.
Really versatile, been used forever.
And then there's machine learning, right? For the really complex stuff.
Yeah. Like random forests, that's a cool one.
I read about that. Sounds pretty impressive.
It is. It basically builds a whole bunch of decision trees.
A whole bunch.
Yeah, each one based on a slightly different subset of the data.
Okay.
And then it combines all those predictions to make a really good overall prediction.
Wow, that's like having a whole team of, I don't know.
Experts.
Yeah, a whole team of experts working on it.
Exactly.
So how do they pick the best model then?
That's where validation comes in.
Validation.
Just like a chef wouldn't serve a dish without tasting it, right? Scientists got to test their models too. to see how good they are at predicting in the real world.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And, the results can be surprising.
Surprising how?
Well, sometimes a simple model works better than a complex one.
Really?
Yeah. Or a model works great in some places, but not others.
So it's really important to...
To test it out. And that helps refine the model and make sure it's actually useful, for conservation.
Right. Yeah, it's got to be applicable to the real world.
Exactly. Welcome back. We're diving deeper into predictive species and habitat modeling, looking at how scientists choose the right model and make sure those models are actually helpful.
Yeah, last time we talked about the different types, like those distance-based models, the GLMs, and
Right.
even those super complex machine learning ones.
And how crucial it is to validate those models to make sure they're actually making good predictions.
Like a double check, but for ecological forecasting.
Exactly.
But how do they even choose the right model to start with?
Well, it's kind of like being a detective. Got to gather all the clues, piece together the puzzle.
So what kind of clues are we talking about?
Well, the first clue is the question they're trying to answer.
The question.
Yeah. Are they looking at, broad patterns for a common species?
Okay.
Or are they trying to figure out very specific habitat needs for a rare species?
So different questions need different models.
Exactly. Then there's the data itself.
Right. We talked about how important data is.
Yeah, what kind of data do they have? How much?
Yeah.
Is it just where the species is found?
Presence-only data.
Right. Or do they also know where it's not found?
Because some models are better for different data.
Exactly. And then, how complex is the ecosystem they're studying?
So if it's a pretty uniform landscape,
A simpler model might work fine.
but if it's really variable with lots of different habitats...
You might need a more complex model.
Okay, so matching the complexity of the model to the complexity of the ecosystem.
Exactly. Plus, there are practical things, too, like how much computer power you need.
Oh, right. Some of those models can be pretty demanding.
Yeah, for sure.
So even with all that, is it still kind of trial and error?
Oh, yeah. Scientists often try a bunch of models, see which works best.
Interesting.
It's like refining a recipe,
Yeah, I get it. One of the papers talked about finding mechanisms in these models.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
What does that even mean?
We see a lot of these models are based on correlations.
Correlations, like...
They show us a species is usually found in certain habitats, but they don't always tell us why.
Oh, so it's like knowing ice cream sales go up when it's hot, but not knowing why people want ice cream when it's hot.
Exactly. Finding the mechanisms is figuring out the why.
Why that species likes that forest.
Yeah, is it the food? Or is it protection from predators?
So it's going beyond the what and into the why.
Exactly. And that's where it gets really hard.
Hard how?
Because ecosystems are so complex, so many things interacting.
It's like a giant knot you're trying to untangle.
That's a good one. But ecologists love a challenge. They use all sorts of approaches to try to untangle it.
Like what?
Field experiments, changing things in the environment and seeing what happens.
Okay.
Or fancy statistics to figure out what different factors are doing.
So it's like being a detective, a statistician, and a field biologist all at the same time.
That's about right.
Huh.
And with all the new tech and our understanding of ecosystems getting better and better, it's a really exciting time for this field.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of the future, these models are getting so sophisticated. Where do you see this research going?
Oh, so many possibilities. One thing is using genetic data.
Genetic data? How does that fit in?
Well, genes can tell you so much about a species,
Sure.
like their history, how they move around, even how adaptable they are.
Wow, so it's like adding a whole new layer of information.
Exactly. Combine that with habitat data, and you can make even better models.
That's amazing.
You can see which populations are vulnerable, track invasive species better.
Wow.
You can even start to predict how species might evolve.
It's like we're going from mapping where they are now to understanding their whole story.
Exactly. And that's not all. There are things like drones,
Oh, right, for collecting data.
Exactly, in hard-to-reach places. It's really opening up new possibilities.
It's incredible. But with all this power, there's also responsibility, right? Like using these models to make real decisions about conservation.
You're absolutely right. It's not enough to just build models. We have to think about how they're used.
So how do we do that? Make sure they're actually helpful for conservation.
Well, communication is key.
All right, back for the final part of our deep dive into this stuff. Predictive species and habitat modeling.
The best part.
Yeah, this is where it gets real, right? Like, how do we use all this amazing science to actually make a difference?
That's what it's all about, right? These models are amazing, but they got to be useful.
So how do we do that? How do we bridge the gap between the science and the action, Make sure it's not just theory, but actually leads to change.
Well, first off, you got to be able to explain it.
Explain it.
Yeah, communicate the findings, and not just to other scientists, but to everyone.
Right, because if people don't understand it.
They're not going to support it.
Exactly.
It's not enough to just show the data. You got to tell the story.
The story of the species.
Yeah, challenges, how these models can help.
It's like those documentaries.
Exactly.
The ones that really make you care about an issue.
Yeah, we need that visuals, maps, maybe even interactive stuff. Make it come alive.
Make it real for people.
Exactly. But it's not just communication. It's also about working together.
Collaboration.
Scientists got to work with the people who manage the land, the decision makers.
Because they have the on-the-ground experience.
Exactly. They know their areas. They can help make sure the models are actually useful in the real world.
So it's like a two-way street.
Exactly. Scientists bring the science, land managers bring the real-world perspective.
And together, you get better conservation strategies.
Much better.
Okay, so communication, collaboration. What about some actual examples of how this is working?
Well, protected area planning is a big one.
Protected areas like national parks and stuff.
Yeah, things like that. These models can help figure out which areas are super important for biodiversity.
So it's like a roadmap for conservation.
Yeah, showing you the most important places to protect.
And with climate change and everything.
Right. These models can show you how things might shift.
So we can be prepared.
Exactly. Protect the places species will need in the future, not just now.
That's amazing, like seeing into the future of our ecosystems.
It kind of is.
What about helping species that are already in trouble?
Oh yeah, species recovery is another great example.
How does that work?
Well, these models can tell you what a species needs to survive.
Okay.
So then you can use that to design habitat restoration projects or captive breeding programs, stuff like that.
So it's not just predicting where they are, but understanding what they need.
And then taking action, giving them the best chance to recover.
That's so cool. It's like shifting from just watching them decline to actually helping them.
And it's not just about individual species either.
How do you mean?
These models can help us figure out how to minimize our impact on the whole ecosystem.
So humans and wildlife can coexist.
Exactly. Like, you can use these models to plan logging so it doesn't fragment habitats too badly,
Oh.
or design roads to reduce wildlife collisions, things like that.
It's about realizing we're all connected.
Exactly. And finding ways to live more sustainably.
Wow. I think we've covered so much in this deep dive.
It's been great.
We've talked about the science, the challenges, the potential of all this,
Yeah.
predictive species, and habitat modeling.
It's powerful stuff.
It really is, and it's not just some abstract idea. It can lead to real change.
Real action to protect species and ecosystems.
And it takes more than just the science. It takes communication, collaboration, a commitment to making a difference.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of, well, all this.
Predictive species and habitat modeling.
Yeah, that. We hope you learned something new and feel, I don't know, maybe a little bit hopeful about the future of conservation.
And maybe even inspired to get out there and explore nature yourself, see what you could discover.
Yeah, go explore. Until next time, happy exploring, everyone.